I never imagined that returning from a 3-day research symposium in Chicago would feel like stepping into a stranger's home, but that's exactly what happened to Evelyn Turner. After presenting her groundbreaking lymphoma study to some of the nation's top oncologists, she'd booked an early flight back to her cozy Cape Cod-style house just outside Boston, eager for a quiet evening with a cup of tea. Instead, she arrived to find every driveway packed with unfamiliar cars and her front door propped wide open. Music pulsed through the living room windows, and, as she crept closer, a massive banner reading *** family means forever, *** greeted her in bold, festive letters. Inside, 98 relatives she barely remembered, from cousins she'd met only at weddings to great-aunts whose names she couldn't recall, laughed and mingled among her furniture. Her mother, Diane, floated through the crowd, clutching a glass of Chardonnay. Her brother, Kenneth, stood by the buffet table, grinning awkwardly as if she were the surprise guest of honor. Every piece of Evelyn's carefully arranged decor, her shelf of research journals, the leather armchair where she reviewed case notes, had been shifted aside to make room for snack tables and folding chairs. As music and chatter swirled around her, Evelyn's heart pounded, not from exhaustion after long days in the lab, but from the shock of realizing that her private life had been handed over to everyone but her. In that moment, she understood that family for them meant convenience, not consent, and that reclaiming her home was going to take far more than a polite request. For the past 7 years, Evelyn Turner poured every ounce of her curiosity, ambition, and heart into cancer research, believing that targeted therapies could transform countless lives, only to return home time and again to a cold shoulder from those who should have celebrated her breakthroughs. Growing up in a modest Cape Cod-style house just outside Boston, her mother, Diane, never missed an opportunity to praise her son Kenneth's steady job selling insurance, yet greeted Evelyn's straight-A report cards with nothing more than a cursory glance before tossing them into an ever-growing stack of expected achievements. Family dinners revolved around Kenneth's modest milestones: his first sale of the month, a promotion to senior agent, while Evelyn's wins in regional science fairs or her admission to a top civil engineering program felt as invisible as footprints in fresh snow. Her father, James, tried to bridge the gap. Before his untimely passing 5 years ago from heart failure, he would slip Evelyn notes of encouragement: "I'm proud of you," even if I don't say it, and quietly display her research posters on the hallway wall, but in public. Diane and Kenneth dismissed her late nights at the lab and her passion for targeted lymphoma treatments as a waste of good schooling, insisting she could have built a real career much faster by joining Kenneth's agency. The implicit message was clear: the marketplace valued Kenneth's steady commissions over Evelyn's unconventional path toward medical breakthroughs. College brought a brief respite of recognition: professors who lauded her dedication, peers who saw her potential, but weekends home reawakened the family's indifference. While Kenneth's baseball games became mandatory family outings, Evelyn's presentations at oncology symposiums were noted only if no one else had plans. She learned early to mask the sting with a polite smile, burying her disappointment under layers of lab coats and journal subscriptions. Yet every text message announcing her latest conference keynote was met with silence or, at best, a clipped "that's nice," as though her research mattered less than the dinner that Kenneth would cook for their mother that night. When James passed away, Diane's financial strain set the stage for another family fault line: the shared mortgage on their home. Kenneth and his wife, Stephanie, insisted Evelyn take the fully renovated second floor while they occupied the first, and Diane moved into a cozy, newly built in-law apartment over the garage. Evelyn used her research fellowship stipend for the down payment. Kenneth and Stephanie secured funding from Stephanie's parents. The written co-ownership agreement drafted by Evelyn's attorney outlined clear boundaries: no event over 20 guests without mutual consent. Each owner's private space inviolate. At the time, the formality felt overly cautious for a family, but it became the only thing standing between Evelyn's sanctuary and Kenneth's growing sense of entitlement. Over the next 4 years, Evelyn's calendar filled with lab meetings and grant deadlines, while Kenneth and Stephanie turned the first floor into a hub of neighborhood socials. Dinner parties Evelyn was welcome to attend if her schedule allowed. Diane, asserting that family visits don't need appointments, would breezily rearrange Evelyn's belongings whenever she dropped by unannounced, tucking away medical journals to make room for party trays. Still, Evelyn persisted in offering Sunday dinners and holiday gatherings, determined to bridge the emotional chasm. Each time, she found herself smiling politely as Kenneth's stories dominated the conversation, and her scientific achievements disappeared like vapor. Through it all, Evelyn clung to a quiet conviction if tomorrow's targeted therapies could save lives, then someday her family would understand that her choices mattered. Little did she know that the next surprise waiting at her front door would force her to redefine the very meaning of family. When Evelyn Turner's father passed away, the family home, a two-story, 2,000 square foot Cape Cod-style house just outside Boston, suddenly became both a refuge and a financial burden. Her mother, Diane, struggled to manage the mortgage on a modest $300,000 property with only her Social Security benefits and a small pension check of roughly $1,200 per month. Sensing an opportunity to help and perhaps to assert his own claim, Evelyn's older brother, Kenneth, proposed a solution. He and his wife, Stephanie, would buy the first floor and the attached in-law apartment, a converted garage of about 500 square feet. Diane would take the in-law space and Evelyn would take the renovated entire second floor, including her private study and bedroom suite. Evelyn didn't hesitate to use Herg's $30,000 research fellowship stipend as her down payment. She saw it as a sensible investment in her stability and independence. Kenneth and Stephanie, with financial backing from Stephanie's parents, contributed $50,000 toward their share, and they all signed a formal, attorney-drafted co-ownership agreement, drawing on a clause her lawyer, Barbara Reynolds, insisted upon. The contract stipulated that each owner's private spaces in Evelyn's case, the second-floor suite, were inviolate. No more than 20 guests could be invited to any event without written consent from both co-owners. Maintenance responsibilities and utility bills would be split 50-50, while any major alterations like adding a deck or converting a bedroom into an office required mutual approval. At the time, the paperwork felt almost overly cautious for a close-knit family. Evelyn trusted her mother and brother and believed her fellow researchers would soon recognize the importance of her targeted lymphoma therapies, leaving little doubt that her contributions would shine through in every room she inhabited. For about 4 years, the arrangement worked in theory. Evelyn's schedule filled with flurry after flurry of research conferences in Seattle, Houston, and New York, while Kenneth and Stephanie embraced their role as first-floor hosts. Their holiday gatherings, complete with roast turkey dinners and Christmas carols in the foyer, became the neighborhood delight, and Diane seemed happier with her proximity to her daughter's space than she had been on her own. Yet the written boundaries quietly morphed into invisible lines drawn on Evelyn's solitude. Kenneth and Stephanie began planning monthly dinner parties as long as Evelyn was okay with it. Though invitations arrived only if Evelyn had no lab commitments, Diane, ever the loving mother, justified her unannounced visits with, "I'm family, Evelyn. I don't need an appointment to check in on my daughter." She'd sweep into Evelyn's study where stacks of medical journals and her laptop lived side by side, tuck away the statistical reports, and arrange platters of shrimp cocktail on the coffee table. Evelyn politely interrupted her revisions to pour glasses of iced tea, smiling through the frustration that her midnight calculations were erased beneath party lights. Despite the goodwill, the 20-guest consent clause went largely ignored. Kenneth claimed that any gathering fewer than 30 people was a household matter and didn't require dual approval. He'd shrug when Evelyn reminded him of the agreement. Those were lawyer words. "We're family." And Stephanie, flashing her practiced smile, would murmur, "You're welcome anytime, just like old times." Beneath each party's laughter, Evelyn felt the contract's protections slipping away. The formal lines she and Barbara had drawn in black and white seemed powerless against the familial claims of convenience and presumption. Through it all, Evelyn held on to the belief that tomorrow's breakthroughs in targeted cancer treatment, her life's work, would vindicate her choices. She still believed that respect would follow recognition. Yet every text announcing her next keynote address, every journal feature of her research, arrived in a household where congratulations felt more like a courtesy than a celebration. As the next family event approached, undoubtedly planned without her knowledge, Evelyn realized that paperwork alone couldn't safeguard her sanctuary. She would need to rely on both her legal resolve and the very same determination that drove her to stand before her peers in Chicago, confident that one day her family would understand the value of the boundaries she'd set in ink and the respect she deserved in every square foot of that home. When Evelyn Turner stepped through her front door, she expected the quiet hush of her second-floor suite to welcome her, just her lab notes, a soft armchair, and the comforting aroma of chamomile tea. Instead, she was met with blaring music, crunched crush of conversation, and the unmistakable sight of her mother Diane arranging shrimp platters on the coffee table where Evelyn usually laid out her research journals. 98 relatives filled every corner of her beloved Cape Cod-style home. Great-Aunt Lucille's knitting basket sat beside Evelyn's stack of medical journals. Cousins she'd never met lounged on her leather recliner, and a row of air mattresses lined the hallway outside her bedroom. A banner overhead proclaimed "Family means forever" in festive red and blue letters. Evelyn froze for a moment, suitcase still in hand, as Diane's Chardonnay glass in one hand beckoned her forward. Surprised, Diane cooed. "We couldn't wait for you to get back tomorrow." Kenneth thought this Saturday was better. Kenneth, Evelyn's older brother, emerged from the kitchen carrying a tray of drinks. His forced grin wavered when he saw the shock on her face. "You got back early," he said, as though that explained everything. But the real surprise was yet to come. As Evelyn's gaze swept across the room, she noticed that every inch of her carefully curated space had been repurposed. Her file cabinet was shoved into a corner. Her statistical models lay scattered under platters of deviled eggs. And someone had taped children's artwork over the whiteboard, where she charted lymphoma cell growth patterns. She recognized Uncle Robert's vintage Mustang parked in her driveway. She hadn't seen him in 10 years, but she certainly hadn't invited him to commandeer her living room. It took Evelyn several heartbeats before she found her voice. "Did anyone ask me if this was okay?" she asked, keeping her tone steady. Diane's smile faltered as Kenneth cleared his throat. "Well," he stammered, "we thought since you're rarely here always at conferences we could just use the space." Diane nodded vigorously. "We're family, honey. You don't need to sign off on every little thing." "Is that what consent means?" Evelyn countered, her pulse throbbing. "Because I own this house too. My name is on the deed. We agreed on a co-ownership arrangement, no events over 20 people without both our approvals." Kenneth's face darkened. "Those were lawyer words," he said dismissively. "We're family. We decided not to worry you with the details." That was when Evelyn noticed a manila folder peeking out from under a pile of Stephanie's, Kenneth's wife, overnight bags in her closet. She excused herself and slipped upstairs, her legs trembling. Inside the folder were mortgage refinance proposals, credit card statements with alarming balances, and a letter from a bank denying Kenneth's loan application. Pages of spreadsheets showed attempts to leverage the house's equity. In bold handwriting across one sheet read, *** plan to consolidate debt and assume full ownership target, Evelyn's half. ***. Her heart sank as the truth crystallized. The family reunion was a calculated gambit. By overflowing her home with grateful relatives, Kenneth and Diane had created the appearance of gracious hosts they hoped would soften Evelyn's stance. Then, once the party settled, they would suggest gently, of course, that she sell her half at a fair price, freeing them to finance their next venture and leave her in the cold. Returning downstairs, Evelyn marched straight to Kenneth. "Why are there 10 times the number of guests we agreed would require my consent?" she demanded, voice low but unwavering. He shifted under her gaze. "We thought it was harmless. Everyone's having fun. It's not harmless when my private space is invaded. My things are moved. And strangers are sleeping in my bed," she replied. Stephanie tried to interject. "We only invited relatives who can't climb stairs, like Aunt Edith," but Evelyn cut her off. "You used my home without my permission. And from what I've seen," she held up the folder, "you're planning to ask me to sell. Am I right?" Kenneth's pallor confirmed her suspicion. Diane opened her mouth, but no words came. In that moment, Evelyn realized that love alone, no matter how loudly proclaimed, wasn't enough to protect her sanctuary. Family togetherness had been weaponized to mask a takeover, and as the music thumped around her, Evelyn knew she had to reclaim her home, her boundaries, and her dignity before the party ever ended. Evelyn's chest tightened as she stood in the doorway of her bedroom, the festivities still thundering through the floorboards below. In her hand was a slightly crumpled manila folder she'd spotted tucked beneath Stephanie's overnight bag's mortgage refinance proposal stamped "Confidential." Credit card statements listing balances that would make any banker wince, and a formal denial letter from Atlantic Coast Bank refusing Kenneth's recent loan application. One sheet, scrawled in hurried black marker, caught her eye: ***, initiate full ownership strategy. Timeline, 6 months. ***. She sank onto the edge of her rumpled bed and spread the papers across her lap. The numbers told a story far darker than a mere sibling squabble. Kenneth and Stephanie had over-leveraged their personal line of credit well over $75,000 in unpaid balances, and their joint mortgage payment on the first floor had ballooned to more than $2,100 a month. They'd hoped to cover the shortfall by tapping into the home equity on Evelyn's half, using their parents' goodwill and hundreds of unsuspecting relatives as collateral in the most literal sense. As she flipped through the refinance proposals, Evelyn realized they'd shopped around at 3 different lending institutions, each time seeking larger advances against the property's $350,000 assessed value. On one page, A broker's note read, "Recommend family goodwill pitch to improve appraisal justification." In plain English stage, a big-budget family reunion to make the house seem cherished, and thus worth more on paper, before convincing Evelyn to relinquish her share at a friend-of-the-family discount. Her heart pounded. Every detail of the party, the polished silver chafing dishes borrowed from Aunt Edith, the rented folding chairs lining the upstairs hallway, the neon family means forever banner had been financed not from holiday joy, but from high-interest credit cards and the faint hope that Evelyn would cave under social pressure. They'd even moved Diane's in-law apartment furniture into Evelyn's private study to make room for cousins with breathing problems, an elaborate ruse to reinforce the narrative that Evelyn wasn't using her space. Evelyn's mind raced back to Diane's gentle, "You don't need to ask permission for family to visit," and Kenneth's dismissive, "Those were just lawyer words," what she'd taken for familiarity. They'd weaponized as convenience, and their convenience came at the steep cost of her equity. Worse still, every relative downstairs had been unwittingly recruited into the scheme. They were the goodwill witnesses in Kenneth's appraisal package. Each nod and "oh, what a lovely home," a line item in his pursuit of total ownership. She closed her eyes and breathed deeply, the faint scent of spilled Chardonnay and shrimp bisque lingering in the air. For years, she'd tolerated the emotional distance at holiday gatherings, smiled through Dominique's sales awards and Diane's offhand critiques of her academic career, believing that one day her research would earn the respect she deserved. But this was different. Her sanctuary had been invaded, her trust exploited, and her financial stake in the property targeted like a locked vault. A slow calm washed over her. She was no longer simply the outsider in her own home. She was a co-owner with legal protections and a lifetime of meticulous documentation to prove it. Late that night, she would photograph every discarded paper plate on her office floor and every indentation in her mattress where strangers slumbered, time-stamping each image on her phone. Tomorrow, she would copy the folder and forward it to Barbara, her attorney, whose careful co-ownership agreement had always felt formal but necessary. And then she would act. She would lock down her half of the house, not with anger or tears, but with the clarity of someone who understood that boundaries, whether personal or financial, must be defended. Kenneth and Stephanie might have counted on her reluctance to stir up family drama. But Evelyn was done staying silent. The ledger had tipped, and she would balance the books on her own terms. As she tucked the final documents back into the folder, Evelyn realized something profound: love might be freely given at family reunions, but respect and property rights were earned through action, and with that conviction, she turned off her bedside lamp, readying herself for the next chapter of reclaiming both her home and her peace of mind. A soft knock at the door pulled Evelyn from her reverie. She paused mid-zip on her weekend duffel-sized, just right for a few days away, and called, "Come in." Through the doorway stepped Aunt Grace, her father's youngest sister, all 90 pounds of silver hair and clear blue eyes, clutching a small velvet pouch in one hand and a gentle smile on her lips. "May I?" Aunt Grace asked, glancing around at the chaos of air mattresses strewn across Evelyn's office floor and half-packed drawers in disarray. Evelyn nodded, stepping aside, as Grace settled carefully on the edge of the bed. Evelyn closed the door, the muffled hum of the downstairs party fading behind them. "I'm so sorry, dear," Grace began, her voice low. "I had no idea you weren't informed." She tapped the folder of financial papers at Evelyn's feet. "When Diane and Kenneth were sending out invitations, I asked if you were part of the planning. They assured me you'd given your blessing. But when I saw your face downstairs..." Evelyn tightened her grip on the duffel strap. "This is the first I've heard of any reunion," she said, her tone measured. "I certainly never agreed to strangers sleeping in my bed." Grace's eyes filled with regret. "Neither did you. I tried to speak up, but they said you were too busy with your work." She leaned forward, producing the velvet pouch. "I think you should have this now." Evelyn opened the pouch to reveal a delicate gold locket on a fine chain. Inside lay a tiny photo of her and her father at her medical school graduation, him beaming, her in cap and gown, the sea of applause still echoing. "He mailed me this the day after you graduated," Grace said softly. "He was so proud. Said it was the proudest moment of his life." Evelyn's breath caught. The memory of her father's encouragement, scribbled notes in her lunchbox, quiet thumbs up as she left for yet another conference, came rushing back. Grace continued, "I didn't mean to eavesdrop, but old ears pick up unexpected things." She paused, choosing her words. "Last night, I overheard Kenneth and Stephanie in the kitchen. They were talking about refinancing the house, your half specifically, and using a big family event to boost the appraisal. Something about using family goodwill to justify a higher value." She nodded toward the folder. I saw those same refinance proposals in my mail. Evelyn closed her eyes for a moment, letting the confirmation settle. So the reunion was staged, she said. Voice hushed. A crowd of our relatives was collateral for their financial maneuver. Grace's gaze was steady. It appears so. They've overextended themselves, credit cards maxed out, mortgage payments climbing, and this was their plan to edge you out. She placed a comforting hand on Evelyn's arm. You have every right to feel betrayed, but you're not alone. A tremor lingered in Evelyn's shoulders. I needed truth. She glanced around at the remnants of the invasion crumpled paper plates on her research table, shrimp cocktail shells beneath her filing cabinet, the banner tearing slightly at the corner. Thank you for telling me. Grace stood, smoothing her skirt. Your father would have been furious at this deception, but he'd also want you to stand firm, use the agreement you two drafted. Document everything. She tapped the locket against Evelyn's chest. And remember, he saw your worth even when your own mother and brother didn't acknowledge it. Evelyn fastened the locket around her neck, the cool weight a reminder of her father's faith. I'm going to leave for a bit, she said, her voice steadying. I need space to think and to act without emotion clouding my judgment. Of course, Grace replied. I can keep an eye on things here. If you'd like, she offered a gentle smile. And if you need anything legal advice, a ride, someone to talk to, I'm just a phone call away. Evelyn nodded and turned back to her duffel. She methodically slipped in a change of clothes, her laptop, her favorite mug, and a small stack of research notes. Then, she pulled her phone from her pocket and began photographing every boundary violation, the dents in her bedroom door, the stains on the carpet, the broken glass from Grandma's perfume bottles in the bathroom. Each shot was time-stamped automatically, building a visual record she could use with her attorney. Grace watched quietly as Evelyn worked. When the last image saved, Evelyn locked her phone and slipped it into the duffel beside a printed copy of the co-ownership agreement. She zipped the bag, then looked at her aunt. Thank you for everything. I'm going to stay somewhere quiet tonight, focus on next steps. Grace reached out and hugged her, the locket warm against Evelyn's heart. Stay safe, darling, and remember, boundaries aren't just lines on paper, they're promises we make to protect ourselves. With a firm nod, Evelyn picked up her bag and, suitcase in hand, headed for the stairs, pausing at the top. She looked once more at the home she co-owned, her sanctuary turned battleground. But now, with clarity and proof in hand, she felt ready to reclaim it on her own terms. Downstairs, muffled laughter now sounded distant, clutching her locket and duffel. Evelyn Turner stepped out into the crisp night air, determined to turn this chapter into the start of her most important victory yet. Evelyn Turner paused at the threshold of her Cape Cod-style home, the soft glow of hallway lights illuminating the trail of air mattresses and discarded party plates, a testament to the night's betrayal. Clutching the small velvet pouch Aunt Grace had given her, she felt the weight of the gold locket against her heart inside, a photograph of her and her father on graduation day, his proud smile a silent promise of support even when her own family turned their backs. With quiet determination, she slung her duffel over one shoulder, its contents carefully chosen, a change of clothes, her laptop, the folder of financial documents, and her phone filled with time-stamped photos of every violation of her sanctuary. She sent a swift text to her closest friend, ***, family emergency. Need a safe place tonight. Can we talk ***, then, without looking back at the family means forever banner drooping in the living room. She slipped out into the cool night air. Each step felt both heavy with the pain of deception and light with the resolve of action. Ahead lay hotel lobbies, lawyer consultations, and perhaps even new beginnings in far-off places. But tonight, Evelyn simply walked, trusting that the boundaries she'd set in ink and the love her father had shown would guide her toward respect and peace. Sometimes, the bravest thing we can do is protect our boundaries even when it means stepping away from those who should love us most. True respect isn't given lightly. It's earned through honest communication and unwavering self-worth. If Evelyn's journey resonated with you, share your own story of setting boundaries in the comments below. And if you believe everyone deserves to be seen and valued, please like this video and subscribe for more real-life stories of courage and resilience.